Councilmember Blumenfield, and we're going to call this meeting to order. First order of business is the multiple item speaker cards, and this is an opportunity for those individuals who have signed up to speak on more than two or more items. You have an opportunity to speak, and you have 2 minutes to speak. A number of you have signed up today on 9 and 10. Although we would usually take you here, we will take you up when we call items 9 and 10. So for now, we will take up multiple item speaker cards. First speaker is Herman? Herman? And can someone, a sergeant, move one of the chairs in the middle there so I could see the time, please? Thank you.
So in Silver Lake, we're talking about a wine company. And I'm here definitely to whine about the determination of public necessity for convenience of more fucking alcohol. That's all we need on both sides of the street. More off-site sales for alcohol. Because that's what the LAPD do on their off time. Get fucking drunk. The same issue on item 3. The so-called public convenience or necessity. But let's just call it alcohol beverages for us to get fucked up. That's a better term. After all, we know about Jose Huizar's DUI in Boyle Heights. And then all these issues under item of CD 13. One other politician with a fancy tie don't mean shit to me because I'm dealing with guidelines and reports and the physical impact statements, which none were applied regarding community impact statements, none submitted. What a fucking joke. And all you people here are looking at the 2 fucking Negro jokers up there. And then we go into the final issue.
Herman, can I hold your time, please? Herman, let me hold your time right there. Hold this time. Look, Herman, you come here to every meeting. You have the right to speak on all the items and speak only to those items. If you refer with a derogatory manner to any individual in this room, that is unacceptable. Personally attacking someone has nothing to do with the conduct of our business. So I would ask that you refrain from that. If you continue, I'm asking you to leave this meeting. Thank you.
Now you see, just like in Nuri's district in CD6, no one's perfect. All we're asking for is a total, or the total amount of 571, 140 square feet of floor area. That's it. Just floor area. Our concerns is not about the welfare of the public, because if it were, all the fucking wetbacks would occupy the fucking space. And I'm not a fucking wetback from Zacatecas. Fuck you, Huizar.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to leave, Herman, this meeting. I warned you to not personally attack anybody here. You are disrupting the meeting in your mannerisms. This happens at every meeting here. For those who are new to these meetings, we apologize if any of the language that was used by this individual offends you. We've been advised that they have the right to express themselves as they wish at these public meetings. And it's really disappointing that this is an every meeting occurrence with these individuals. But until we get better advice, we're going to continue this way. Thank you. Okay. Our next speaker is Wayne.
Drinks there, Jose. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So let's talk about nothing but pure fucking bullshit. Number 1, we don't have no report from the niggas. Fuck off that, number 1. We don't need no report. I don't need to read shit. I know what it is. Now we get number 2, more alcohol. That's right. Get behind the fucking wheel and drink drive. That's right. City officials do it. So if they go over here to Council District 13 and get fucked up, they get a DUI, like Jose Weezer, like Justin West, and they both drinking their asses off and everybody else following them down to the drunk. Yes, sir. Number 3, Ryan Brown wants a motherfucking liquor license. Of course, because when you're on the goddamn theater, you're bored. I understand. Who the hell want to watch that show? So you go outside and drink, get fucked up. That's the way to go. Every time you go out to a theater, you go out to a party, your job is to get fucked up. And that's job number 1. Job number 2, get your bitch fucked up, and then you can do your business in the bathroom. Just make sure you get them bathrooms clean. Now we get over here to the ghetto. No, we're not talking about the 8th District ghetto. Today we're talking about the worst ghetto, the 6th District ghetto. And we're going to put more shitty fucking housing in that shitty fucking Van Nuys area. That's right. And ain't nothing going to do about it. And then number 13, we got that guy that don't wear a fucking tie-bonnet doing that shit. And this project's as big as Jose Weezer's fat wife ass. Thank you very much.
All right. So we will now continue with the agenda. And the first items is the consent calendar. Item number 2, we will move on consent without any objection. Item number 3, we will continue to August 28th with no objection. Item number 4, approve on consent. No objection. Items number 5, 6, 7, and 8, we will continue to August 21st. Items 5, 6, 7, and 8 continue to August 21st. Item 11, we will also continue to August 21st. Item 12, we will continue to August 21st as well. No objections on that? So ordered. That brings us to the first item on the agenda. Item number 1, report from the Director of Planning, Vince Bertoni. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Weezer, members of the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, Vince Bertoni, Director of Planning. Just real quick, I wanted to give you an update. We produced last month our first kind of highlight or update on terms of the progress on our transit-oriented communities program, as well as other aspects of Measure JJJ, which was passed by the voters in the fall of 2016. So those you'll remember that in November of 16, the voters of Los Angeles enacted Measure JJJ, which required a certain amount of affordable housing units and also certain wage requirements for certain types of upzoning of property through the general plan and the zoning ordinance. It also, one of the provisions of Measure JJJ was directed the Director of Planning to create incentives for development near transit, which included both rail transit as well as high-frequency bus transit. And it gave a certain minimum thresholds that needed to be included in this program. That program was adopted last fall. It was September 22nd of 2017 is when it went into effect. And we produced a report, a housing progress report, which really looks into the first roughly 9 months of the program. And I gave you copies, printed copies for you. It's also available on our website. We've also have put it out on our social media accounts. So we've distributed it fairly widely through the city. But just some of the highlights are listed in there, and just to give you a sense of the program, it's been a very successful program since it's been adopted. If you look over the last 9 months, nearly about 19% of all of the units that have been entitled through planning the last 9 months have gone through the Transit-Oriented Communities program. And so it's facilitated over 5,500 new units which were proposed, and over 1,100 of those would be covenanted as affordable. What important aspect of this is it has incentives for extremely low income housing units, and extremely low income represents people, a one-person household living at 30% of the area median income, which is around $18,000 a year here, and that's the category which is at most risk at becoming homeless in Los Angeles. So if you look over the last 9 months, 471 extremely low-income units have been submitted for entitlements over this period of time, which represents, if you look at the affordable portion of the units that have been proposed, that's 36% of those. So that's been a very high percentage. Also, we've actually had more housing units proposed through the transit-oriented communities than even our density bonus program. So, for example, we had about 836 units proposed for TOC over this last 9 months versus 503 through density bonus. And one of the things we've been able to do is to significantly reduce the amount of time that it takes for the entitlements to go through the process for the TOC program. So it's the average for transit-oriented communities incentives is 3 months versus 7 months in the density bonus program. So it's less than half the time. Now, under transit-oriented community program, it is a tiered program, and in addition to the tiers are related to how close the proximity to transit, whether it's rail or bus. We also have in the program, some of those are actually by right that go into the building, straight into building permit, and some go actually into planning for the entitlement. So that's just kind of a brief overview of it. The more of the details are here in this housing report that we produced towards the beginning of July. Our plan is to do a similar report every quarter where we will look at how we're doing on the transit-oriented communities program, density bonus, as well as our total number of housing units we're produced. We'll probably start adding in special topics in there, such as accessory dwelling units, because those have been very popular. And if you notice in there, we have a map at the end that shows you kind of just distributing, throughout the city where the units are getting proposed. We plan on the future probably taking a look and kind of adding other things to the map. We can start showing you where we are having accessory dwelling units proposed, density bonus units proposed, and so forth. So this is just the beginning of a program of us to really expand the information that we're getting out there for about housing in Los Angeles. It's such an important issue in the city, and it's one of the most important issues that we're facing today in the city, the issue of housing, as well as the homeless issue, because those are very much related. I also have with me available is Callie Hardy, who's one of our planners working on housing policy, to answer questions, as well as Kevin Keller and Lisa Weber here. Happy to answer your questions, and that concludes my report.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Bloomfield?
Yeah, first, thank you for doing this. This looks great, and enjoying looking through it and seeing it. I'm a little confused. Could you help me understand the graph on page right in the center when you open it up on the right-hand side?
Sure.
Where the blue and the green, the zone change, general plan amendment, and the non-JJJ zone change, they kind of fall off in quarter 2.
Right.
What does that mean?
It's what it's showing you, and it's shown by the number of units instead of the number of applications, because an application can be 2 units or 2,000 units. So we wanted to just in essence show the order of magnitude of the volume. And so what you're seeing in there in terms of the units, you're seeing a spike right before the third quarter of 2016. So that was when you had the first of 2 ballot initiatives on the ballot. So the first was in November, which would have been of 16, which would be the quarter 3. And you can see the big spike before then. And then the second was in the spring of 2017, which was should show up in the second quarters, where you're going to see that really drop off. So what you're seeing is the number of, you're seeing a big increase and then a big decrease as developers were anticipating a change in the city's rules and trying to get their applications in before.
Right. But it seems like we since the second quarter, we've had no zone change, general plan amendment, housing units. Is that right, or is that?
Well, it's been very little. There's a little bit, if you can start seeing.
Oh, I see.
There's a little bit of green picking up.
Right at the end in quarter 1 of 2018,
Right.
there's a sliver of green.
Right, and
Going
that
back.
exactly, because what you're seeing result is the reaction to the ballot initiative. After the ballot initiatives and the upswing, before the ballot initiatives, you had the general plan amendment and zone changes, and afterwards, very, very little. And so what you saw, the increase was through our transit-oriented communities program, and then the other types of entitlements. So you see density bonus relatively similar. Before the spike, there's an increase in the second and third quarter of 2016. You see density bonus go back to where it was before, this new band of transit-oriented communities, and more of it, which is all other entitlements, which would be things that would really comply with the zoning, zoning and ordinance. And then you start seeing just a little bit more coming in the general plan and zone change, subject to JJJ.
Well, I mean, that'll be really interesting to follow how that trend grows. Seems like we're going back to the units are stabilizing, but there'll be less zone changes, which is probably a good thing.
Right. Exactly. And that what we want our folks, to have good plans, to have good plans that are updated, that people follow the rules. The one thing to keep in mind too is we had in 2018 you're seeing this upswing. Before we had part of the upswing is probably a natural curve after you had the spike and then the downturn and then the natural upswing. But also keep in mind we had the first of 3 of the installments of the housing linkage fee, right, which occurred in June. That was, I forget which date that went into effect. That was June.
This is Callie Hardy in City Planning. The first phase-in date was June 18th
Right,
this year
18th.
for the affordable housing linkage fee.
Right. So what you're going to see a little bit there is some of that spike up is probably folks trying to get in before the June 18th deadline for the housing linkage fee. So what we're probably going to see on a monthly basis is we're probably going to see that go down a little bit in July and August, and then it'll start trending up. Our next increase is December of this year, and then the third is June of next year.
I mean, it'd be interesting for future presentations on this to have, on these different peaks and valleys, if there is a significant external event that's causing it to have a little dot and say deadline of, because that's very instructive to understand. Because I'm looking at that saying, wow, we're really seeing an increase, but it's an artificial increase in the sense that it's a reaction to the deadline, and then it'll probably go down in the next quarter.
And then maybe go up. So some of those things we don't really see till a few months out.
Right.
But that's the kind of feedback we'd love to hear. So you and your staff want to, take a look at this, and we're happy to get any kind of feedback because we plan on, again, producing these quarterly. We want them to evolve and change and be a little bit dynamic. We may highlight some things one quarter, another quarter. So we're happy to get the information out that you find relevant.
Yeah, I would just put little lines or something, demarcations, so that you know what those external changes are and why. Okay, cool, thanks.
Thank you. This is a great report and some great information for the public. And while we see that there has been a decline of zone changes and general plan amendments after the passage of JJJ, we could also say that while we're updating the community plans, as you mentioned, there'd probably be less of a need for the zone changes and general plan amendments. But I think initially we may have missed an opportunity to update, do those zone changes, general plan amendments, because we haven't been doing our job in updating community plans and there's this need for housing. So it's hard to rectify that and think about the what ifs, but nonetheless, we did see a general decline of applications after JJJ was passed, correct? I mean, are we attributing all of that to JJJ or to other factors as well?
There may be other economic factors in terms of investment, changes in investment that have occurred over the last few years, especially investment coming from mainland China. As we've seen that, there's changes in that. So there's other things that are happening out there in the market in general that may impact it. But you can see kind of that upward swing, and especially as the initiative started to get talked about, which they started getting talked about in the end of 15. Unfortunately, we're going back as far as we've actually tracked housing units. So we started tracking housing units in the end of 15. And we just think that's a better indicator than the number of applications that come in. So there may be some other factors that are out there, but it's hard not to see the impact of ballot initiatives on just the behavior of the market, how the market reacts to it.
Now, the proportion of affordable units that we're building in relation to the overall number of units that we're building, would you think we're at a good place as a city right now, or moving in the right direction?
Well, I think that we're definitely moving in the right direction, and the TOC programs helped us really move into that direction. But we have there's been so many years where we just haven't built both enough housing and enough affordable housing that it's hard to say. I don't think we could say that we have enough and that's where we are, where we need to be. But I definitely believe through these programs we're moving in the right direction. I mean, one thing to keep in mind, there is a difference between transit-oriented communities and the density bonus program. The density bonus program is an outgrowth of state law, and there's very specific requirements. And so although it's producing some housing, we also have limitations in terms of how we can handle design review on it. Transit-oriented community is a local program, so we actually are able to impose much more design standards on that and actually have more of a qualitative design review. So that it's a positive, not just because we're producing more housing units, but we also have the ability, we have much greater ability to make those really integrate into a neighborhood better through design.
I think you're correct. You're correct in saying that like downtown is a great example of how we just needed housing overall. So initially, we just appreciated the investment and market rate, whatever it was. We were welcoming any type of housing to be built. And now that we had seen the initial phase of market rate housing coming in, some people call it luxury, whatever it is. We have both extremes in downtown, and we're asking for more middle income workforce housing. But then again, a lot of the affordable housing that we're building, a lot of that is negotiation with our city, with our department, and to see what level is appropriate if they're not JJJ. So I don't know if we need an overall blanket policy on requirements for affordable housing or not.
Well, we have several avenues through our density bonus and through our transit-oriented communities, our housing linkage fee, and we have a lot of other aspects. I know when we're looking at tools in the new recode and the new community plans to really embed those in the plans and certain affordability requirements. So one of the things that we'll be able to do through the new community plans is to really focus a little bit more in terms of the types of affordability in the neighborhoods, because there are different needs. And one of the reasons why, for example, if you kind of look at the map of the TOCs, and we can kind of refine that map so it's easier to see for you, there's very little of the TOCs in downtown Los Angeles. And one of the reasons why is that what we found is that density bonus was working well in high-rise construction. But what we were finding is the fact that you'd have a certain number of units that would be very low income, which was good, maybe 11%, but the balance of it were market rate, and they were also very expensive housing. And they were larger units and very expensive. So what we did is when we did the TOC program, we calibrated it to try to make it more enticing to wood frame construction, which is a much less expensive construction type, and to make sure and to also calibrate it so the fact that the portion of the units that aren't deed restricted, the balance of those units would be smaller units in wood frame, so those would be more reasonably priced. And if you look at the map, you can see a lot of these are going to be wood frame construction. So it's not just producing deed restricted affordable, but the balance of those are more attainable in terms of the cost of the rents. So it's really, there's a lot of interesting information. Again, the more feedback we hear from you, the better, because we'd love to kind of produce the data that you find that is going to be relevant, so that we can start crafting the plans in the way that that you feel is really appropriate to the communities.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you for this report. It's very informative, and I personally believe we're heading in the right direction to calibrate overall a good balance and to have more affordable housing out there, although there's a great need for housing in general. So anything that helps us build more housing. Great. Thank you. We will receive and file item number 1 and move on to item number 9. Mr. Mejia, if you could read that 9 and 10 together, you could read those into the record, please.
Item 9, Councilman, this is an appeal, actually 2 appeals by the Atwater Village Always Association and Corey Smith. It relates to the vesting track map. And item 10 is the general plan amendment and the vesting zone change.
Welcome. Is staff here to present these items? Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. Oliver Knepper with the Department of City Planning. So the 2 cases that you have before you involve the rehabilitation of the Albert Van Leeuwen complex, which is a historic cultural monument designated by the city in 2016. And the entitlements that were requested were a zone change general plan amendment, and height district change. And concurrent with that was a vesting tentative tract map. As it relates to the zone change, general plan amendment, and height district change, the Albert Van Leeuwen complex has been a historic site and been in existence for some time. The city went through the process of rezoning and redesignating the subject property and the surrounding land uses, and as a result, the site became non-conforming. The building became non-conforming. In 2016, as I stated, the city designated the subject property as a historic cultural landmark at the Albert Van Leeuwen complex. As a result, we now have a historic cultural monument sitting on a site which is zoned open space and agriculture and designated as minimum residential. So no use would be permitted that is consistent with the Albert Van Leeuwen factory complex. And so the zone change, general plan amendment, height district change is intended to ensure the facilitation of the rehabilitation and preservation of that complex. Nevertheless, there were queue conditions that were imposed in order to ensure that the factory building did not become a nuisance to the surrounding residential communities as well as the equestrian community in the immediate area. As it relates to the vesting tentative tract map, here the applicant filed for a subdivision of the property into 3 lots. There were 2 appeals filed on the City Planning Commission's action. The first appeal was filed by the Atwater Village Always community or community group. And there are several issues that have been raised as part of their appeal, and I'll try and go through some of them briefly here. First is that the map is not consistent with the general plan. However, both the State Map Act and the LAMC allow for a vesting tentative tract map to be approved so long as there's a concurrent zone change and general plan amendment which has been filed to ensure the consistency of the tract map with the general plan. So that is the case in this particular project. We have a vesting tentative tract map that was filed and a zone change and general plan amendment that was concurrently filed. The second issue relates to CEQA. Here, the arguments that were put forth were the same arguments that were put forth to the City Planning Commission, and I want to just go through a couple of those issues that were raised. First off is the cultural and historic resources. Again, as I stated, the site is the Albert Van Leeuwen Complex, a historic cultural landmark. As part of the T conditions, we imposed a requirement that the project get approval by the Cultural Heritage Commission prior to the effectuation of the zone change. So the zone change doesn't occur and the tract map doesn't occur unless the Cultural Heritage Commission reviews the rehabilitation plan for the project, and without that approval, the project is not able to go forward. The second issue is circulation and access. The area is an equestrian area, and so there were some concerns as to conflicts with equestrians. This project will close up one driveway, and so there will be an elimination of a driveway, and then there will also be roadway improvements along Chevy Chase consistent with the mobility plan. And then the last issue I wanted to raise is the land use. And again, this is similar to the reason for the zone change and general plan amendment. The site is an interesting site. It has a historic cultural monument. It's a factory. It's been designated by the City of Los Angeles. But the zoning currently is for agricultural and open space uses. And so while there is an inconsistency with the general plan, with the factory building currently, the zone change and general plan amendment intend to rectify that situation. The second appeal, and also a little bit of this first appeal, involves the North Outfall sewer line. This issue came up during the tract map process. There was a letter that was submitted by the Bureau of Engineering in October that stated that there was some concerns with the Outfall sewer line. We subsequently got a updated or revised letter from the Bureau of Engineering, which revised their position and provided certain conditions that we then imposed as part of the approval of the track map. We have Bureau of Engineering here to speak specifically on behalf of the North Outfall sewer line if you wish to ask questions. With that, I would recommend approval of the vesting zone change, general plan amendment, and height district change, as well as denial of the 2 appeals filed for the vesting tentative track map, and then adoption of the mitigated negative declaration. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Now moving on to public comment, we will take up the appellants first. The 2 appellants of record for item number 9 are Douglas Carstens and Eric Lieberman. We'll take up Doug Carstens first. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Douglas Carstens, and I'm here on behalf of the Atwater Village Always group. It's very nice to see the chair again, honorable committee members, city attorney. We have submitted extensive comment letters about this. Our letter of December 14th, 2017 detailed why the environmental impact report is required. This project is not a rehabilitation of a historic cultural monument. It is a zone change and general plan amendment without a definite proposal attached to it. We are asking that you condition the approval of the zone change and general plan amendment on non-demolition. It's very simple. It seems everybody agrees that this is a site worth maintaining and celebrating, and so we are asking that that be guaranteed, that if demolition is even contemplated, the zone change is revoked. At a minimum, if zone change is contemplated, an environmental impact report must be prepared. Right now, it's possible that with the approval in place, a zone change could stay on the books and demolition could be sought even without an environmental impact report. I think at the Planning Commission, staff member Charlie Roush had it right. He stated under questioning that an EIR would be required to demolish the Van Louis complex. That's great that Charlie Roush would say that. We could certainly agree with that. We'd like to see that as a condition, an enforceable condition that guarantees demolition will not occur, and if it does, that the zone change is revoked and that an environmental impact report will be prepared before that demolition might occur. There's no question of the historic cultural value of the Van Louis complex. I think that's a starting place and a given. And by the way, I'd like to take half the time, about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, to hear from Jackie Sloan of the Atwater Village Always group, because we certainly appreciate the city council and council members' patience listening to public comment, and CEQA as an environmental Bill of Rights for participatory democracy certainly provides a very important role for the public. With that, I ask that you deny approval of this project. If you do contemplate approval, require an environmental impact report. And I'd like to introduce Jackie Sloan.
Thank you. On behalf of our community, I wanted to just explain why it is that we're all so worried about demolition. And to understand that, you have to understand the uniqueness of this area. So the Van Louis complex was intentionally given that protective agricultural zoning that Mr. Netburn referred to. And that was to protect the adjacent equestrian uses along the river. In fact, this is the last remaining equestrian area in the city of Los Angeles, right along that river. So to ever change this protective zoning, we feel there would need to be a compelling reason. So we're here today because the community and the owners have found a common vision. That is the reuse and rehabilitation of the Van Louis complex. And the owners admit that that compelling reason for the zone change that they request is to allow for that reuse. So if ever there were a time where those buildings were demolished, even at no fault of the owners, could be a flood, it could be some environmental reason. At that point, the vision for this project is lost, fault or no fault. And we need to come back here, reconvene this process, and decide together with the city council, with the council district, with the city planning commission, what would be the proper use for a piece of land in a protected equestrian district along the Los Angeles River. So let me just explain this loophole the community feels exists. So the entitlement is crafted in a way that they hope will ensure reuse of the buildings. But how it's crafted is that the T condition that Mr. Netburn referred to, that condition that makes the zoning tentative, that condition is removed at the moment that the plans are approved by the Cultural Heritage Commission. But that doesn't mean that the plans have been implemented. There's time then where the rehabilitation needs to happen. In that moment, the land value soars dramatically. This will now be CM zoned land along the Los Angeles River. Come on. At that moment, the cost of an EIR, that could be just the cost of doing business. So we ask that you please make any entitlement conditioned on non-demolition. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next appellant is Corey Smith.
Thank you, Councilman. Corey Smith, appellant. My family lives adjacent to the property site. The North Outfall Sewer Line, Unit 17. Bureau of Engineering Engineer, Mr. George Avanesian, stated on November 15, 2017, in a nutshell, there is a 52-inch sewer, 15 feet deep, 91 years old, and this is due for rehabilitation in 2021. It is built by cement. It's going to fall apart any minute. That was his words at the public hearing. Next, his next statement, and no work, including demolition, improvements, remodeling, construction, grading, etc., or adjoining within the structure will be permitted until this system has been rehabilitated. Mr. Advanesian, the city engineer, also stated on November 15th, and basically that outfall sewer that protects and collects all of the sewer from the entire neighborhood is held by soil pressure. Any movement, any shaking, any rumbling, any additional construction, trucks or renovations, modifications could just break that entire system apart, and there will be a major public health issue. That was his assessment in October per the memo or letter, as Mr. Netburn stated. Then on January 4th, the next year, 2017, the new memo stated that now the pipe is okay, that they've done a reassessment. But if you look at the city records, Bureau of Engineering, Bureau of Sanitation, there has been no visual inspection of the interior of that pipe since 2003. In 2003 visuals, which is a video, multiple videos, that you can see on the Atwater Village Always website right now, shows a very poor condition, as stated in city reports, and it's obvious when you watch the video. So then, here we are, January 4th, the new assessment that says that the pipe condition is okay. But that assessment was obviously based on a simple desk assessment that someone agreed to change at that point in time. Mr. Netburn also stated that there's a Bureau of Engineering staff person here. I encourage council members to ask that staff member, has there been an additional physical inspection inside the pipe since 2003? Or is it just they decided that the conditions was good enough to go forward with this work? The developer has requested to build or proposed to build a 3-story office building on this site. You will need to have some type of soil moving way of tests or drilling or something like that if you were building a building. I ask that the council seriously consider, very much consider, that this zone change should be delayed until after that pipe is repaired. My family lives within, a few hundred feet of this pipe. The community is within a few hundred feet of the pipe. The equestrian is within a few hundred feet of this pipe. We've all seen what happens when, a water line, a 12-inch water line busts and the disaster that it caused. How about a sewer line that's 6 feet tall? You can walk through this thing. How about when it busts 15 feet down, there will be no way to repair it. Nobody will say, oh, I'm going to step forward and repair that right away, other than the city obviously will have to repair it. Nobody's going to take responsibility for those repairs and take on the liability. They're merely going to say the city should have fixed it before it collapsed. Thank you very much, Councilman.
Thank you very much. The representative of record for the applicant is Eric Lieberman. Is there someone here who signed up as?
I don't have Eric Lieberman, but Alan Abshez is here to represent the applicant.
Okay, great, thank you. You got 5 minutes as well.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Alan Abshez, representing the applicant 4000 Chevy Chase LLC. This project is really a multi-year collaborative effort between community stakeholders, Councilman O'Farrell's office, and the planning department to establish a feasible strategy for preserving and reactivating this former wallpaper factory, which was designated by the city as a monument in 2016. This factory was a factory the city wanted to shut down, and it wanted to remove the use of the building, and that's why the property was rezoned from M2 to agriculture. The intent was to remove the factory. But recent sentiment is that we ought to preserve these buildings. So the problem is that the buildings have no zoning that can be utilized. If they're zoned for agriculture or open space. We appreciate the very diligent work of the planning department on this matter. Mr. Netburn, Mr. Hendricks, and this project will bring about the reactivation of this complex. And by providing relevant zoning that will attract tenants who can make the investment to actually rehabilitate the building. The project will eliminate area blight. It will protect equestrian activity. You've heard from equestrians. What you should know was there was a heavy-duty industry going on here, a wallpaper factory. What's now proposed are QCM uses, such as creative office, light manufacturing, live workspace. These uses are all much more compatible with equestrian use than the former wallpaper factory use that went on for years and years. The T condition you've heard about actually does what the appellants want it to do. The city will adopt a zone change ordinance. That ordinance will require that before the T is removed, plans for rehabilitating the two historic monument buildings on the property be processed and approved by OHP. If that's not done, the zoning lapses. You've heard about demolition. Of course, this is not about demolition. This is about rehabilitation using the building. If demolition were ever proposed, the city code already requires an EIR. So that Mr. Bernstein can speak to that. This is the historic monument. No such thing is proposed. That's not the purpose of this project. The environmental review demonstrates that all the parking necessary to serve this use can be provided on site, and very little square footage is in fact proposed to be added. We're reusing the existing buildings, and a small additional building is proposed for a total of 13,600 feet of additional building at the site. Almost nothing. When the project is completed, the FAR of the site will be 0.58, less than half of one. The claim is made that this is spot zoning. Of course it's not spot zoning. The city rezoned the site in 1972 to make from M2 to agriculture. And so it was trying to treat this site and eliminate industrial use there. The proposal now is to allow light manufacturing use of the site so the buildings can be preserved and rehabilitated. That's the city's purpose. That's why the city designated the property as a historic monument, and the zoning proposed will allow that. And similarly, there's no merit to the appeal that was filed by Corey Smith. The Bureau of Engineering, when the project was first heard, had some concerns about the North Outfall sewer, which has had failures, but not in the area of the project. Subsequent to that hearing, there was further investigation conducted by BOE. There's a representative here if you have questions. And they have recommended a set of conditions to ensure that construction can take place on this site. We're reusing the existing buildings in a way that won't threaten to damage the North Outfall sewer. Pleased to answer any questions you may have. This project's been recommended to you by the Planning Department, by the Planning Commission, and by Councilman O'Farrell's office, and a representative is here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody Rath, Damian Robledo. Each person has 2 minutes to speak now. welcome.
2 minutes for myself? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, 2 minutes for yourself.
I won't need that much. My name's Jody Rath. I own an adjacent equestrian property next to the 4000 Chevy Chase, and I've owned it for about 4 years. And it's I'm all for the rehabilitation of the property because it's been just kind of a blight, I think, on the periphery of the equestrian community. And it would be nice if it could once and for all be changed a little bit so that it's not just a storage yard with lots of kind of bad things happening around it. So I'm all for the change and allowing rehabilitation of that property. Thanks.
Damian Robledo, Elaine Brock, Carrie Setkin.
Hello, my name is Damon Robledo, and I live, work, and play on the LA River. Instead of fear and loathing of the new, instead of demonizing change, how about we collaborate with our neighbors on this project? The banks of the LA River do not belong to any one private gated community, any one nonprofit, and they certainly do not belong to any one family. The banks of the LA River belong to all citizens, all residents, and all creatures. Excluding newbies and new families or asking Atwater to defend a private closed club is not equitable and fair. It's actually Trumpian. I propose that we work with the families and property owners that have deep roots in our city and work with local developers that are driven by philanthropy and giving back to our great city. Why do we continue to shut the doors to new neighbors coming to the LA River? And what developer do you know that donates infrastructure, a new bridge, well before they ever ask for something in return? A new mixed-use development will allow us to create local jobs, give opportunities for small businesses, create walkable and rideable amenities, as well as create a safer park. Or we could just slap the outreach hand and wind up getting a big, dumb stucco box that screams F you because we were not brave enough to listen, to improve on it, and collaborate on it. Think big picture, my neighbors. We are going to gain a bridge to Griffith Park. We're going to gain more open space that has been land banked for years. Think bridle paths and pedestrian paths, playgrounds, enriched community centers. River neighborhoods around the world eschew cars and traffic and use bikes, scooters, strollers, wheelchairs, and even horses. LA River development does not have to be exclusionary and built in spite of protest. It can be inclusive, equitable, and reflective of the community. Let's preserve the small Van Louis office and at the same time create a template for commercial river development that has many community benefits and reflective of the history of Atwater Village. Go Bears.
Great. Go Bears. Thank you. Elaine Brock, Carrie Setkin, Cheryl Roberts.
Good afternoon. My name's Elaine Brock, and I am a tenant adjacent to this presentation, this property. The property was rezoned in '72 by Art Snyder to keep it horse property. This is spot zoning. Now, is the city attorney here by any chance? All right. The sewer line was done and has not been inspected totally. Yes, I know, because when the water was contaminated, the people that did it and revised the water also stated to me, Ms. Brock, do not allow any building or anything to happen until this sewer line was actually verbally cited. Now, as far as the horses are concerned, yes, I have 45 horses right now, and it is going to be imperative. It's pushing. It does not conform to the community. We're a small community. We have people that have worked there for 30 years. By developing more traffic, also there's going to be an additional ad from our councilman. He wants to put a 4-story building in at the central service yard with a 3-story building for parking. It's going to inundate our community. I don't like it. I have lived on the property for 35 years. I've seen a lot of changes. And if you call this politics and everything else, sirs, it is. And may I have your attention? You're so busy talking to the other lady. Anyway, this is the situation. It's spot zoning. And with everything else, yes, we are having a multi-million-dollar bridge that the city council voted for that is not imperative to the horse people. It's dangerous. That's here nor there. you still have a spot zoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hello.
I have a few letters that I was going to hand out after my brief remarks.
Okay.
As an urban planner and a resident along the LA River, but not in Elysian Valley, I've looked at this zone change for several years, and it does not make sense. It's not compatible with adjacent uses. It appears to me to be a spot zone. I have an attachment from the page of ZMIS that shows surrounding uses as R1 and A1. There's nothing commercial. And I wanted to quote the land use plan that we have, which is 20 years old, but it's the only thing that we have in Atwater now that refers to the way the land is used in this area. Atwater, in many respects, is the most isolated portion of northeast LA with respect to the rest of the plan area. It occupies a narrow strip of level land between two major barriers, the LA River and the railroad tracks to the west. The area is served by a north-south artery, San Fernando, and kind of skipping along here, there is minimal land use conflict in Atwater Village. It's almost fully developed as a well-maintained residential area with most structures dating from the first half of the century, fronting on the north-south streets. And then I'm going to skip down. The south of the industrial area, which is this area that we're talking to, the lands are immediately adjacent to the river. They're occupied by city support and maintenance facilities. There's an equestrian center and a public park. And yet there's been no community plan update, and right now this zone change is coming in as a suggestion. If it were really to be the beginning of a mixed-use corridor, the city should come out and do some community planning and talk about demographics and really present this project. But instead, each time that we asked for the planning department to come out and present in an overview, our requests were ignored. And it is a spot zone change, and it doesn't seem appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's some letters. Can I get these to somebody?
Our sergeant at arms will take it. Letter. Okay, after our next speaker is Cheryl Roberts, Kelly Blandpide. Welcome.
Thank you. So, as you're all aware, Councilman O'Farrell had asked that our committee meet with the owner, which was done, but was a waste of time and money on our end, as they were not prepared to make even the most minor of concessions. For example, in case you're wondering why we're so concerned about the possibility of the historic buildings being demolished, a simple non-demolition clause was requested but denied. That alone is a clear statement of their intent and belies their many assurances that the project entails retrofitting the buildings, the latest being in Alan Absh's letter to Plum. An intent to demolish the buildings is also contained in the MND. As one of the few people who actually read the entire 794-page MND, which by the way is riddled with half-truths, lies, and inaccuracies, an intent to demolish the buildings is actually contained therein as well. Additionally, another ask was that should the owner decide to sell the buildings, that we would be given the right of first refusal. That was also curiously denied. So we have talked to the Trust for Public Land. They are interested in the property, which, as was stated by a previous speaker, would give the chance for, in fact, the land to be for beneficial use for the entire city and not just to enrich an already overly wealthy developer. So that's what we would like to see, beneficial use for the community on this property, and retaining the equestrian use, which was the purpose of the zoning, in which the mayor himself was actually involved as a council person. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Roberts.
I don't know if I can talk on behalf of Kelly Bonpet. She had to drop off a family member at
No,
the ER.
I'm sorry, we don't allow that. Otherwise, people would come here and write names and
well,
speak for them. So that's
Carrie
that's
just
policy.
submitted her letters, but she wasn't able to come.
She could submit a letter. If you have a letter from her?
Yeah, Carrie
Okay, great, thank you. Cheryl Roberts, that was you, right? Kelly Blampide, that was her, your friend, okay. Karen Barnett, Karen Knapp, and Craig Bullock. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here because this project or zone change places new construction in a flood zone. The BOE maps for the special flood hazard area clearly show that. This is map number 3 from BOE. You saw that in my letter, which should be on file. I would say that the city seriously has to look at building anywhere along the river with caution because of this. The river channel is currently compromised at just under 50%. I believe it's 48.1. And there seems to be no funding from the Army Corps, city, or county to clean it out. So with that said, I would hope you would wait before approving any kind of zone change, which includes construction at this point. And I put that into previous letters which you have, but I want to leave with you additionally a map of the future limited access and exit points for Outwater Village. Once the metro is built, there will only be 6 exits, maybe 7, to get out of North Atwater Village. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, I'm Karen Knapp from the Atwater Village Neighborhood Council. And everybody said a lot of good things, so I just wanted to let you know that previously the council, the neighborhood council, submitted letters to Mr. Nedburn in objection to this project due to the vagueness of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment period. Craig Bullock, not here? There you are.
Good afternoon. My name is Craig Bullock, and I'm with Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell's office. The Albert Van Leeuwen complex is special to Councilmember O'Farrell because it's in a unique equine community. It's a historic cultural monument, and because of who Albert Van Leeuwen was in the LGBTQ history. The maintenance, preservation, and rehabilitation and economic success of the complex is critical for the building's viability. It is for these reasons that the council member supports the general plan amendment and the zone change that is before you today. He is requesting, the support of the general plan amendment and the zone change does not mean, however, that concerns brought to you today and in letters to the planning department have been ignored. They have not been. As such, the office is suggesting amended conditions so that the complex security and future preservation are solidified. Of the 2 conditions that are revised, they have been presented before you. The conditions will be requiring, as discussed earlier, approval from the Cultural Heritage Commission for both the rehabilitation plan and for the site and landscape plans. In addition, a condition to be added would be within 60 days of the City Council's approval of the general plan amendment and zone change, the owner shall take reasonable and necessary steps to secure the current conditions of the showroom building and the exterior of the factory building, cause trash and debris to be removed from the exterior of the property along Chevy Chase Drive and Verdon Street, and clean up and thereafter maintain current landscaping along the exterior of the property along Chevy Chase and Verdon in a neat and orderly condition to the satisfaction of the City Council office. These conditions will ensure that the building is maintained, preserved, and rehabilitated. In addition, the Council office desires to continue an ongoing dialogue with the community as we move forward. In addition, a submittal was made to you for the Bureau of Engineering report. Mr. Dale Williams is here this afternoon should you have any questions to address the concerns that were brought up. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you submit those condition requests? Okay. Those circulated? Okay. I don't have them. Do you? Someone on my staff? have them? Oh, here they are. Okay. I got them. I got them. Okay. Did staff from the planning department have a chance to review these conditions?
Oliver Neprin, Department of City Planning. Yes, we did have a chance to review those conditions, and they seem to be acceptable.
Okay. And any questions from committee members? One of the things I wanted to make clear is the issue was raised about demolition, and if in the future, although the direction is to rehabilitate, in the future if there's an effort to demolish, would that require an EIR?
Yeah, so it's a historic cultural landmark, and so if the site were to be demolished, that would require an EIR.
Separate from any of the actions we're taking today, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yes?
It's Terry Kaufman, Macias, council member. Under Los Angeles Municipal Code 91106.4.5, if you have a substantial propose a substantial alteration or demolition to a designated monument, you have to comply with CEQA. So that would include preparing an initial study, and then, you know, arguably it would go on to an EIR, but that process is in the code.
Okay, great. Thank you. And secondly, one of the speakers or appellants brought up the issue of the pipe and whether that was sufficiently studied to withstand these changes. Can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, so we have Dale Williams here with the Bureau of Engineering, so I think he can better speak to that.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I believe a memo has been provided to the committee regarding sort of a timeline to summarize all the investigation that took place. And if I could just kind of go over that, briefly summarize. The hearing for the tract was held on November 15, 2017. Bureau of Engineering was in the process of investigating several issues with regards to this proposed project at that time. Among those issues was the condition and protection of the North Outfall sewer. This specific segment of the NOS is identified as Unit 17. The Bureau of Sanitation and the Wastewater Conveyance Engineering Division of Bureau of Engineering initiated a study of the Unit 17 rehabilitation project and made field observations back in June of 2017 before we were referred this project. Those initial findings are what resulted in the memo of October 2017, which is identified in the appeal. A preliminary report from the Wastewater Division identified those concerns that were expressed at the hearing. Some reference was made to that, although not in the words that were used at the hearing, more general concerns. In addition, prior to the hearing, BOE made a request for additional time to resolve several other incidental items related to the project, reflected in our initial response to the planning department, requesting that the applicant make satisfactory arrangements with Bureau of Engineering prior to the hearing. Bureau of Engineering's concern at the hearing was that such conditions be included if the map were approved, and that was the purpose for our comments. At that hearing, the advisory agency did take the case under advisement, and the applicant was then had to work with, make arrangements with the Bureau of Engineering on those conditions. We initiated a series of meetings to understand the nature of the project proposed, and in addition, our Wastewater Conveyance Division examined the data for Unit 17, specifically reviewing the material for the pipe segment, specifically within that tract. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The Wastewater Conveyance Division examined the data for Unit 17, specifically for the area within that tract. And upon review, the condition of Unit 17 is such the construction for this segment has been deferred until later, while other more urgent work is completed first. Initially, they had anticipated that construction would be in 2021, but after further review, concluded that it would not be that soon. Upon review of the project scope and further evaluation of the project conditions, Sanitation and Bureau of Engineering mutually agreed that a revised set of conditions would address the concerns of Bureau of Engineering and Sanitation and allow the project to move forward. As such, a revised report was issued to the Department of City Planning on January 4th, 2018, from which the conditions which were included into the letter of determination came from. And if there are any other questions on that, hopefully I can answer that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, I will, based on the testimony and the record before us and the recommendation from the Planning Commission, the Planning Department, and Council District 13, I'll move to approve item number 10 and to deny the appeal and sustain the Planning Commission's determination in approving the vesting tentative tract map on item number 9 and to incorporate conditions as set forth by Council District 13.
And the letter from BOE is part of the record as well.
Yes, we'll include the letter of BOE to be part of the record.
And adopt the mitigated negative deck, the mitigation measures, and the mitigation monitoring program, Council, and findings.
Okay, we'll incorporate that into the motion. Great, thank you. Any objections to that? Seeing none, so ordered. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next item, Mr. Mejia, is item number 13.
Yes, Councilman, this is a report from the West LA APC. It includes an appeal. It relates to the environmental clearance of the project in CD 11.
Okay. So the appellant, Amanda, let's get a staff report, please. Brief overview.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
My name is Julietta with City Planning. The item before you is an appeal of an environmental clearance, case number ENV 2015-3505, for a project consisting of development on 3 residential lots, lots 22 and 24, located at 925 and 927 Marco Place, within the Venice Community Plan, within the Millwood sub-area of the Venice Coastal Zone Specific Plan. The project is comprised of the demolition of an existing single-family dwelling on Lot 24 and the rehabilitation, remodel, and additions to an existing single-family dwelling on Lots 22 and 23, the relocation of that structure to Lot 24, and the construction of 2 new single-family dwellings on Lots 22 and 23. The project was determined to be exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Section 15303, 15331, and 15332. CEQA Guidelines Section 15303, which is the Class 3 Category 1 exemption under the city CEQA Guidelines, allows for construction up to 3 single-family dwellings. And CEQA Guidelines Section 15331, which is the Class 31 exemption, allows for projects limited to the maintenance, repair, stabilization, rehabilitation, restoration, preservation, conservation, or reconstruction of historical resources in a manner consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. And Section 15332, which is the Class 32 exemption, is applicable to infill development within urbanized areas. The appeal of the environmental clearance centers on 2 issues, one being one of the structures as part of the project is a contributor within the Millwood Walk Streets Historic District. That structure, located currently at 925 Marco Place, is going to be moved to Lot 24, and the appellants argue that in relocating and remodeling that existing contributor, that it would impact the integrity of the contributor as well as the district. A historical resources report, historical resources assessment was provided on November 2016, as well as a supplemental analysis on February 2018, which were reviewed by the Office of Historic Resources, and the report recommended that the project as proposed, the rehabilitation, the relocation, and the additions would not impact the integrity of the contributor or of the district overall, as well as the construction of the 2 new single-family dwellings, that there would be no impact on the integrity of the district. Therefore, staff's recommendation is to deny the appeal.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to our public comment. First up is the appellant, Amanda Seward or Sowardy.
Hi, Amanda Seward on behalf of the appellants. This project involves a contributor to a historic district. We're all in agreement that we're talking about a historic district, and we're all in agreement that we're talking about a 100-year-old craftsman house that is a contributor to the district. And when we're talking about in a historic district, you can make changes to contributors, but the changes have to comply with the Secretary of Interior standards. And in this case, they don't comply with two of the standards, and we had expert testimony in the record on those points. The two Secretary of Interior standards that are a problem here are, one is that in addition to a contributor, cannot overtake the contributor. It has to be supplementary. And in this case, you have a one-story craftsman house where they're only preserving 20% of the front of the facade of the house, and they add an overbearing second story, which violates the Secretary of Interior standards. The other Secretary of Interior standard that is a problem is one that says, yes, you can add to a contributor, but when you remove the addition, the contributor has to still be there. And in this case, when you remove the second story, you remove the rest of the 20%, the rest of the house on the one-story house, you're not going to have the contributor left. So in that sense, it violates the Secretary of Interior standards. And there hasn't been a lot of discussion at all on how the two new non-contributors, how they will fit in with the neighborhood. And that is a requirement under CEQA, and it is a requirement under the land use plan for Venice. And so again, here, if you look at it carefully, there is no factual basis for the conclusion that the contributor will still stay a contributor. The city relies on a report that was bought and paid for by the applicant from a historic group that says, oh no, this addition follows the Secretary of Interior standards. But under CEQA, if we have a substantial argument, a fair argument, that it does not follow the Secretary of Interior standards, you've got to do more of an environmental review. And that's what we're asking for here. We're asking for a EIR to review how this really impacts a historic district. And there are not that many contributors left in this district. And so we just want to make sure that the city is following the rules and not overlooking them. Thank you.
Thank
I'd
you.
like to reserve some time too for after the applicant speaks.
We don't do that here. We have everybody's, the appellant, applicant.
Then I will say in closing, pay close attention to the evidence. Does it follow the Secretary of Interior standards? Does a contributor follow the Secretary of Interior standards? Those are the rules we follow in LA when we're looking at historic districts. We had two board members of two separate historic districts in the city submit evidence showing that this would not be, if these changes were made in their neighborhood to a contributor to a historic, in a historic district, they would not be approved because it would make the contributor not a contributor and therefore would impact the historic district. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Friedman on behalf of the applicant.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. Daniel Friedman with Jeffrey Mangels, Butler and Mitchell here on behalf of the applicant. First off, I want to thank planning for all of their hard work on this. There are certain complexities in the planning process that sometimes there's evolutions to the code. In this case, Survey LA came into effect around 2013. 2014 slowly started rolling out. And our client sat down with planning and said, how do I build a project that works here in this context, in terms of the context of Survey LA, in terms of the context of the community, and in terms of the context of the Los Angeles Municipal Code. And after working with planning for several years, you may note that this is a 2015 project, they came up with a project that ultimately got planning's recommendation of approval, and after hearings before the West LA Area Planning Commission, got a 5-0 unanimous approval by that commission. Really illustrating the hard work that was put into this by not only my client, but also planning to make sure that there was a project that worked, that made sense, and that complied with all the rules. In terms of the appeal claim, there really is no evidence. I think you can look at the evidence here and reach a conclusion that makes sense, and the evidence is that the project does comply with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Not only did experts specialized in this area conclude that in a report submitted to planning, but so did planning staff, and so did a supplemental report. You'll see I submitted yesterday a supplemental peer review analysis from a separate historic expert who concluded once again that this is a project that does not cause a substantial adverse impact to a historic resource, that is being done consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. There were comments that there were quote-unquote experts who have submitted evidence to the contrary. Those experts are not qualified under the Secretary of Interior standards to provide that type of input. So I raised questions with that type of evidence being submitted and being proposed as expert evidence. It really is not. Finally, I want to emphasize this final point. The building will remain a contributor. This was something we discussed a lot at commission here, at the Area Planning Commission hearing. And not only did planning agree, so did my client's experts, that the building that they're concerned about will remain a contributor. And if anything, and I think something the city can feel good about, through this project, it will remain a contributor, will stay there, will be renovated, improved, and be in a position to contribute to the community for years longer than it would have otherwise, if not for this project. So with that, my clients are here. If you guys have any, if the council members have any questions, or if staff have any questions about the project or the historic analysis, and we hope that you deny this appeal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Robin Rudisil, Sue Kaplan, Janet Smith,
Good afternoon, I'm Robin Rudisil, Venice stakeholder, and I'm for the appeal. All you have to do is to know this project requires a CEQA review, is to walk down Marco Walk Street and see how much this project and its cumulative impact will damage the overall historic district, which is also a highly scenic area under the coastal zone. To allow this protected historic coastal resource, this contributor, to be significantly demolished, approximately half, moved, and then endure an add-on that is over 70% of the total structure and not at all compatible, very modern, is unacceptable on many counts. This project meets several of the exceptions to a CEQA categorical exemption, and above all, it's obvious it will cause an adverse cumulative impact to this neighborhood, this historic district, and the Venice Special Coastal Community. It's essential that other alternatives be looked at in a CEQA review, an EIR. And lastly, it's unacceptable that the project was both designed and determined exempt behind closed doors with OHR and the applicant-funded expert. Please approve the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue Kaplan, a resident of the historic Millwood Walk Street District. Before you are three historic analyses paid for by the applicant, saying and telling you what they want you to hear. Their rep was also trying to paint the neighborhood appellants as not knowledgeable and that our case is frivolous.
It is decidedly not. We had an objective analysis done by someone known to OHR and has been extremely successful in promoting historic cultural monuments. I don't think you can call our professional analysis speculative or unpersuasive just because it offers a different view, and that we, as the public, could not afford such expensive and analyses. And in addition, I, as a layperson, am not unfamiliar with historical practice and the process. I thought we had 2 minutes.
No, you get 1 minute, but because the other items, we took them together, there were 2 items, those had 2 minutes. But you could finish your thought here.
Thank you. Okay. I have been successful in 2 applications for historical cultural monument, Temple Mishkan Tefillah and the Irving Tabor Westminster residence, both in Venice. This is a project concerning historic structures defined by CEQA in a potential historic district. It meets the criteria in the guidelines, 2 of them being that it is a 50-year-old structure and that it has an RI 145 for the neighborhood. Certainly, if a CEQA analysis was done at the beginning, it would have been determined that losing the historic structure would have a significant adverse impact on the neighborhood and would destroy our chance for an
Thank you very much.
Please
Thank you.
grant the appeal.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Janet Smith. I live on the block, the 900 block of Marco Place, where this project is proposed. There's a reason it's taken 3 years to get to this chamber. The reason is that this project stinks. That's why all of the commissions and the planning commissions that we've met with have kicked it through several phases of discovery and debate. 8 hours at least at the West LA Planning Commission. Currently, there are 17 single-story houses on this block, only 9 two-story. This is a tipping point with these 3 constructions. There will now be, instead of 65% of single-story, in this historic district, it's an historic district made up of contributing homes that are diminishing and disappearing, irreversibly and irrevocably disappearing. We urge you to take a moment and consider that this change in the balance of 2-story and 1-story houses is worthy of an environmental impact study. Thank you for your time and your work.
Thank you. Shepard Stern, Ron Harrell, Gil Harrell.
Hi, I'm Shepard Stern. I live next door to this project at 923 Marco Place. I'm here today not just representing myself and my family that I've raised in this house for over 33 years, but I'm representing over 100 of my neighbors who, like myself, think it's absurd to give a categorical exemption to a project of such unprecedented scope and magnitude. In addition to losing this historic house, as so many others have spoken about this afternoon, that has been the centerpiece of our and flagship of our 900 block, we're also going to lose over 30 mature trees. This is tantamount to deforestation of a small urban forest. We can't have it both ways. The City of LA has invited me to 3 and now 4 meetings about sea level rise. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. That was my minute?
Yes, but you could just
can
finish
I just keep
up.
going for a few more seconds, please? The concrete footprints of these oversized homes for millionaires will substantially impact the ability of the 900 block to mitigate its storm waters. Please, this is too important an issue right now, not just for Venice, but for all of Los Angeles. Please grant us a full hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gil Harrell and Ron Harrell. We just wanted to thank the staff for letting us, guiding us in terms of understanding all the guidelines and how to approach this project, so that we understand all the sensitivities and understand all the rules of how to do this. Yes, as someone previously has said that this has been quote-unquote kicked around and gone through many meetings. It has. It's gone through 3 LUPIC meetings, 1 B&C meeting, and 3 APC meetings. So the project has been vetted through and through, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have for us.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from staff, from committee members? Seeing none. On the staff, anything to add, given the public testimony?
Juliana with City Planning. I do want to mention that we did provide a copy of the updated categorical exemption forms as well as the findings to the committee, and also Ken Bernstein, Principal City Planner with the Office of Historic Resources, is available if you have any questions.
Okay. Great, thank you. We're reviewing the record, and I'd like to move that we deny the appeal, given the record before us. Seems like everything was followed with, in terms of the planning director's determination of granting the CEQA exemption and following the West LAPC's denial of appeal as well. So any objections to that? Seeing none, so ordered. Thank you. Next item, Mr. Mejia.
There's no further items, Councilman.
Okay. We have public comment. No one has signed up for general public comment. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.